Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome all to today's reading from Brilliant as the Sun, a retelling of Srimad Bhagavatam. We are reading from Canto 6, Divine Protection, and we will begin chapter number 16, King Chitraketu meets Lord Sankarshan. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yat kripa tamham pande Shri Gurum Deenatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Hari Om Tat Sat. King Chitraketu meets Lord Sankarshan. Just as Narad was about to teach the mantra, the queen broke down sobbing, "No mantra can relieve me from this terrible agony." We've been reading in the earlier chapters how King Chitraketu and his queen Duty, they have been bereaved, and they've been reminded that they know they're quite knowledgeable and they understand the cycle of life and everything, but still they are not able to come to terms with what has happened to them. So Narad Muni is there, and he is going to help them to come out of this terrible agony. Chitraketu held her hand. "Let us at least try their suggestion." She turned her tear-streaked face to the two kindly sages. You know, it says Sage Angira and Narad. She turned her tear-streaked face to the two kindly sages. "If you truly desire to relieve my heart from this unbearable pain, please return my son to life. Nothing else will give me peace." The two sages glanced at each other. Then Narad said, "Very well, it shall be as you ask, dear queen." Approaching the baby's cot, Narad placed his right hand over the lifeless body. Closing his eyes in concentration, he loudly called, "Mighty living entity, eternal soul, good fortune to you. Just see your father and mother. They, and indeed everyone here, are overcome with grief because of your untimely death. You may now return and give them happiness. Enjoy this life surrounded by loving relatives. In due course, you can accept the throne and delight in royal opulence." As Narad called the departed soul to return, the king and queen rose and hurried to the cot. With anxious anticipation, they peered back and forth from Narad to the lifeless body. To their astonishment, the child's body began to glow with life. The king and queen clasped each other with joy as the boy opened his eyes and searched around the person on whose command he had returned. Narad reassured him he could now remain with his loving parents and continue his life. Verse 4. So we have read from verses 1 to 3 so far of chapter 16. Now we begin from verse 4. To the surprise of all present, the baby, who previously had not learned to speak, replied to Narad, "I, the spirit soul, continuously transmigrate from one body to another, sometimes in heaven and sometimes in hell. Sometimes I'm human, sometimes an animal, and sometimes a plant. I have had so many parents. So please tell me which of them you mean." Narad directed his attention to Chitraketu and Krityaduti. "Here are the father and mother who mourn your departure." The child seemed unmoved. Addressing Narad, he said, "No one has begotten me, for I am an eternal soul. So why should I accept these two people as my parents?" Krityaduti sobbed, "Harsha, my son." Verse 5, she reached out to pick him up, but he pushed away her hands. "Why do you think I am your son? In this material world, time brings us together and then separates us. In a previous life, we might have been friends, enemies, or even neutral to each other. None of these relationships are permanent." Chitraketu shook his head. "Enemies? If we had been enemies, how could we have so much love for you now? We love you and you love us. We are your parents." Verse 6, the child replied, "Why not? Consider this. When gold is in your possession, it is very dear to you. The same gold could later come into the possession of your enemy and be used to finance your murder. The Gold is neither a friend nor enemy, but it can help or harm you. Similarly, the eternal soul is neither a friend nor foe, but depending on the arrangement of providence, sometimes we take the birth as friends and sometimes as enemies. Chitraketu and Kritadyuti both looked stunned. Then the queen again held out her arms. My son Harsha, do you not remember me? I'm your mother. Verse 7, the boy looked away. Sometimes the soul does not take birth in a human body, but in an animal body. In either case, our relationships are temporary. Kritadyuti tried again. Son, please. Harsha turned away her and but what if I had taken birth as an animal in your estate? If I belonged to you, you would have felt some connection with me. But if you later sold me or gave me away, you would no longer have even thought about me. It's the same between us now. I have left and there is no further connection between us. Krityadyuti collapsed, weeping. Chitraketu tried to comfort her and then turned to the baby. Why are you treating us like this? We are your parents. Do you not feel anything for us? Verse 8, the soul said, we briefly had a relationship of parent and child, and during that period we loved each other. That relationship depended on a bodily connection, but we are not these bodies. It is only the material body which takes birth and dies, not the actual person. We are the eternal spirit souls who neither take birth nor die, nor my connection with this body is finished. So my relationship with you, this is not something to either be happy or sad about. Chitraketu and Krityadyuti stared uncomprehendingly at the boy. Verse 9, Harsha tried again. Try to understand. I'm not this body. I'm a spirit soul. I have no beginning and I cannot be destroyed. It is the soul within the body which animates it. But the soul does not depend on the body. We spirit souls are extraordinarily wonderful. Indeed, we are qualitatively as great as the Supreme Lord. The difference between us and Him is that we are infinitesimal, and therefore the material energy can make us forget Krishna and falsely think ourselves lords and enjoyers of all we survey. We therefore get different material bodies with which to satisfy our material desires. Verse 10, like Krishna, whose qualities we share, I see no one as a friend or an enemy, nor do I think of anything of this world as mine. Such things do not affect the spirit soul. As with the Lord, we simply observe the material bodies which have nothing to do with us. This was verse 10. Verse 11, however, Krishna is great and we are small. We can do what He can do what we cannot. He can do what we cannot, and He creates a law of karma and is therefore never subject to it. He never has to accept a material body, and because He is spiritual, nothing in the material world affects Him. We are parts and parcels of Krishna, therefore we possess His qualities to a minute degree only. Because conditioned souls are small, they are affected by material reversals. If you wish to become free of your grief, you must take full shelter of Krishna. Verse 12, Harsha's body then fell back lifeless. Chitraketu's many queens and courtiers became animated. Did you see that? Oh my God. How was that possible? He's gone. Not even a goodbye. Chitraketu and Krityadyuti alone remained silent, wiping away the last of their tears. They turned away from their son's body. As they left the room, Chitraketu stopped to instruct his chief minister, we will be in the shrine, arrange for his funeral and call us when everything is ready. Verse 13, later that afternoon, Chitraketu and Krityadyuti, surrounded by the other queens and courtiers and led by qualified Brahmins, recited the funeral mantras. They all watched as the flames devoured Harsha's small body. When the ceremony was complete, Chitraketu addressed his queen, my dear wives, you may go to your father's houses, for I will soon enter the forest. This is what King Chitraketu has told his queens. Attachment to one's material body, home and family is very difficult to give up. However, today I renounce such attachment. which is the root of illusion, lamentation, fear, and pain. So it's beautifully described by King Chitraketu to his queens that what does the attachment does. Attachment is the root of illusion, lamentation, fear, and pain. Krityaduti remained stoic in the face of Chitraketu's announcement. A deep sense of detachment had descended on her heart. Verse 14, her co-wives, however, became pale and flustered. Look where our envy has got us, one said. Now we have neither a child nor a husband, said another. Chitraketu heard them and said, did you have anything to do with Harsha's death? Consumed with remorse, they fell to their knees and confessed their crime to their husband. Chitraketu listened quietly, then turned to Narada and Angira. What is the fitting punishment for them? Angira said, let them go to Yamuna and take a bath. I will then instruct them how to atone for this sinful deed. Verse 15. Chitraketu bowed before the two sages. By your mercy, I have realized that I have nothing to do with this material body. I shall give up family life. Angira smiled like an elephant coming out of a muddy reservoir. Narad laughed, an excellent metaphor. Angira, he turned to Chitraketu. We will accompany you to the Yamuna. Verse 16, at the river, Chitraketu bathed, offered oblations of water to the forefathers and gods, and then made his obeisances to the two sages. O sons of Brahma, kindly instruct me what I should do now. Verse 17, Narad smiled. I am pleased with you, King Chitraketu. You are a self-controlled devotee and surrendered soul. Hear from me now the mantra I mentioned earlier. Verses 18 and 19, O Lord, I offer obeisance to you. You are the syllable Om in Vedic mantras such as Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vasudeva, Pradyumna, Aniruddha and Sankarshan are your spiritual, blissful expansions. You are self-satisfied and you are fully peaceful. I bow to you, the ultimate truth. One without a second, we meditate on you as Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagwan, the three forms of Lord. Paramatma is in our heart. Brahman is the effulgence coming out of Lord. And Bhagwan, as we know, is the absolute Lord, the original form of Lord himself. Verse 20, my Lord, the waves of attachment and hatred do not agitate you, but I, the small spirit soul, always suffer from such disturbances. You control everyone's senses, but the senses control me. You are great and I am small. You expand unlimitedly into eternal forms, but I transmigrate from one destructible body to another. Verses 21 to 22, you are also the impersonal Brahman, which is entirely spiritual and beyond all material conceptions. No one can describe that form. O Lord, I seek your protection. The material creation comes from you, is supported by you during its existence, and after annihilation returns into you. Chitraketu had been repeating the mantra, but he stopped and said, please, can you explain this? Narad said, consider this metaphor. A clay pot is made from earth. It stands on the earth, and after being made and when destroyed, it enters back into the earth. Similarly, the material manifestation comes from Mahavishnu, rests on him during its existence, and re-enters him at the time of annihilation. Yes, that makes sense. Please continue teaching me the prayers. Verse 23, I offer my obeisance to you who pervade everything, both inside and out, just like air. However, neither the senses, intelligence, or mind can know you. Chitraketu looked confused. Why can we not perceive Krishna, even though he is within and without of everything? Verse 24, Narad said, listen to the next part of the prayer. It will help you to understand. Unheated iron cannot burn, but when heated by fire, it can act as like fire. Similarly, the body, its senses and organs are just lumps of matter which cannot function until infused by Lord's all-pervasive energy. However, just as heated iron cannot burn fire, the senses and organs cannot perceive the Lord. With a glance at Narad, Angira said, so far, dear king, the great sage Narad has described the two preliminary features of the absolute Brahman and Paramatma. The next part of the prayer explains the Bhagwan feature. Verse 25, Narad nodded approvingly and continued speaking. O Supreme Lord, person, you live on the topmost spiritual planet where a multitude of the best devotees always serve you. You are the most perfect person, the master of all mystic powers, fully transcendental, complete in six excellences: wealth, strength, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation, and glorified in the Purusha Shukta prayers. Please accept my humble obeisances. Verse 26, Narad stood up. O king, you should continuously recite this prayer. Chitraketu bowed before him. Master, I fully surrender to you and will follow your instruction. Narad held up his right hand in blessing. Angira and I were on our way to see Lord Brahma when we heard the news of your son's death. We will now continue as before. Verse 27, after the two sages had departed, Chitraketu sat beside Yamuna river for 1 week. He subsisted on water only and continuously chanted his mantra with great care and attention. Verse 28, at the end of the week, while deep in meditation, Chitraketu rose out of his physical body and entered the celestial planet of Vidyadharas, receiving a form like theirs. They greeted him and said, "We welcome you, pious one. Because of your devotion to Vishnu, we accept you as our ruler." Chitraketu looked disappointed. "I do not want a material position. I worship the Lord to attain his shelter." The other Vidyadhara spoke reassuringly. "This is just an intermediate result of your spiritual advancement. As you continue with your practice, you will progress further." Verses 29 and 30, Chitraketu immediately resumed chanting the mantra Narad had taught him. By its power, his mind became increasingly enlightened. In the brief time he saw Krishna's form as Ananta. He was white like the fibers of lotus flower, dressed in bluish garments and adorned by the brilliantly glittering helmet, armlets, belt and bangles, surrounded by liberated souls like Sanat Kumar. Ananda looked at Chitraketu with his reddish eyes and smiled. Verse 31, Chitraketu's mind became infused with the transcendental knowledge and his bliss, emanating all remnants of material contamination. Waves of ecstasy washed over him, making his body and hair stand on end, and tears streamed from his eyes. Overwhelmed with love, he prostrated himself before Ananta. Verse 32, his tears moistened the area where Ananta stood. However, he could not utter a sound because his emotion choked his voice. Verse 33, Ananta smiled in affection as Chitraketu struggled to control his feelings. He felt highly fortunate to have the audience of Lord Ananta, the personification of the Holy Scriptures and the spiritual master of everything, and he wanted to glorify him with suitable prayers. Verse 34, folding his palms, Chitraketu said, "My dear Lord, you are the unconquerable, and yet you allow yourself to be conquered by devotees who have controlled their minds and senses. When your devotees desire no material profit for their devotional service, you give yourself to them. Thus they come fully under your control." Ananta said, "My dear devotee, some would say that by thus glorifying me, you neglect Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, who are also powerful controllers of the material creation." Okay, so we'll continue the reading from verse 35 of chapter 16 next time, because this is a bit long chapter. So thank you for joining. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna. I hope you all had wonderful festivals yesterday. Yesterday was Hanuman Jayanti, Radha Kund Appearance Day, then Balram Ras Yatra also. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna.